Hello, everyone. I am Devin Moore, Humanity Rising Ambassador, founder of the Race to Speak Up anti-bullying organization, and your host of Humanity Rising's Mindful Connections podcast. We've partnered with Open Mind Health to bring you mental health professionals from across the country to educate and give you advice in real time on subjects like today's topic, which is bullying. If you have any questions during the episode, feel free to just put them in the chat and our guests will answer. Also, we'll have an open Q&A session at the end. Joining us today is Celeste Lopez. She is a licensed therapist in New Mexico and Washington State who works with both teens and adults in behavioral settings. She has supported people from many different backgrounds, including those going through really tough times like hospitalization, incarceration, or major life transitions. Hi, Celeste. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm so good. I'm really excited to be here and talking with you and seeing if people have questions afterwards. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. How about for you?
Oh, I'm doing very well. The sun is shining right now. I'm in a calm state because about to talk about a topic that's very, very specific to humanity rising, very
Yeah.
specific to, unfortunately, a lot of people in modern day. And I'm just
Mhm.
happy to have a professional like you come onto this podcast and talk about a topic like this. So, are we ready to just dive in?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. So you started working with youth right after graduating. What drew you to work with kids even as young as fifth grade in such emotionally complex settings?
I wish I could say that it was just something that I was immediately drawn to. What actually happened was I needed a job right out of grad school. There was a particular job opening, and when I got the job, they were going to determine who I was going to work with initially. So I could have landed with adults, I could have landed with the kids, and my supervisor just thought that what she saw in my training and my personality, she thought I would be really good for the kids. And so that's where she sent me. And I am so grateful that she did. It was a lot of fun to work with them. My favorite thing about working with kids, no matter how young, because we had a range, we had quite a range of kids that were hospitalized at the time. It was a rough time in their life. But I also had some teenagers that were pretty close to graduating high school. So we had such a range, but the one consistency with all of them, which made them so great to work with, was how much they wanted to get better and how resilient they were. They were determined to do something better, whether they really wanted to be there or not. So I think as time grew on, it was so much more fun to work with them. It was, I don't want to say easier because they were going through a rough time, but it was easier to want to work with kids because the kids are so resilient. They're the best. They have something, they've got this little bit of like oomph and grit that sometimes adults you have to like really pull at to get them to that same place.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate the word that you just used, resilient. I want to give you
Mhm.
applause for that word. I think especially being a part of Gen Z and just a lot of people who are, within being Gen Z, kind of, we don't really like to take just anything from people. Not that that's necessarily resilient, just being able to go out and, do like, I don't know. I think I just appreciate that word that you used. Anyways, okay. But let's
Yeah,
move on.
no,
So,
it's
yeah.
important. It's an important word, and that was because we're talking about bullying today. There
Mhm.
are, 3 main aspects that I kind of look at when talking about bullying, and resiliency is one of those things. And so it's an important word, so I'm glad it stood out for you.
Yeah, and I mean, you've worked in both a children's mental health hospital unit and the adult prison system. What are some of the most important differences and similarities you've seen between the two populations?
Hmm. Well, I mean, big difference is obvious, right? We're talking about grown adults who can make a lot of their own choices. And then we're talking about kids who sometimes don't have a lot of choices in their life because they have so many adults making choices for them. But despite that, you'll find more similarities than you'll find differences. Because I say, I worked with grown adults. Yes, my oldest client was approaching 80, actually. But I will say my youngest client that I had at the prison that I worked at was 19. And so there was this huge age range of people that I got to work with that were in similar. It was similar in that they were all incarcerated. Some of the similarities that you'll find though is that much like kids, they were really confined to you are allowed to do these things, and these are the things, these are the rules, and this is what you're not allowed to do. Another similarity is that, it was something that we talked about. I was so fortunate that I got to work with a team. I had a team at the prison, and something that came up so often was that, we had in our groups, we had people come in and they wanted to show you how tough and how hard they were, and how, you're not going to mess with me. You're not going to get me to talk about things that I really don't want to talk about. And we just kind of accepted that and said, okay, that's fine. But are you open to being in this group setting? Are you open to doing this, that, and the other? And the more that they trusted and just delved into the process, the more we saw those walls come down. And there were so many times where I was looking at a grown adult who, in my eyes, I could see like this little wounded child that just wanted someone to tell them that they weren't a bad person, someone to tell them that they had done a good job. A good job in the prison system, it goes a long way for someone's just self-esteem when they're at really low points in their lives. And when I've gotten the opportunity to work with kids, I've taken that very similar approach to how much kind words can go a long way for a kid. Because most people in life, they just want to be told that, someone sees me for who I am. Someone sees what a good job I did. Someone sees that I tried something that was just so difficult. And that's something that it's a human thing. Whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, whether you're a teen, whether you're an 80-year-old grandma, grandpa, there are just certain human needs that it just feels good to have. And that's part of working with humans. It's part of being human, is being able to recognize that stuff.
It's so interesting that you bring up that example of the adult who you were working with, and you could just see that, it's just a child, like at heart and stuff. Because
Mhm,
I'm just thinking about how when I do my race to speak up against bullying workshops or any other
mhm,
workshops through Humanity Rising, and
mhm,
I've spoken to a wide variety of different adults, just adults from a variety of different backgrounds, and those who have gone through bullying when they were younger. And one thing that I also just kind of notice is just the impact that it has that will lead into their adult life, that continuous amount of anxiety or that continuous spouts of just not wanting to be social simply because of what you went through when you were younger, a
mhm.
variety of different things. And it's all unfortunately caused by bullying and leads into adult life. And everyone, just to kind of reiterate what exactly bullying is defined as the unwanted, aggressive, repeated behavior aimed at a target, and it is meant to inflict harm. And it can also be a power imbalance. There's a lot of different parts or components to what bullying is. And while not all people who bully become criminals, I mean, you've specifically have seen some behavioral parallels between individuals you've worked with and those who engaged in bullying earlier in life. Can you talk about that or talk about it without generalizing?
Sure. So, one thing about when I was preparing to talk about this topic, it's something that I was informed about, but needing to take like an extra step. Like, what can I really give to people on this topic? And one thing when I was looking at research, I was looking at YouTube videos, I was trying to listen to other professionals and trying to see, like, okay, what is kind of the similarities that everyone's really talking about. And one of the important things to point out is that bullying is experience specific. So, in your own experience, whether someone is the bully or the bullied, right? Whether you're on the giving or the receiving end of that, what you'll find are patterns. And especially if you are the receiver, I heard this wonderful piece of advice from a psychologist that I was when in my in preparing for this, and she said something to the effect of, "Look at the instances when you are getting bullied." Right? Because there's gonna be consistencies, or at least we would assume so. And it's experience specific. And I always wanna point out that, the society that we live in, that kids are raised in, that they're being raised in right now, um, the world is not always the kindest place, and I wanna be sure that we acknowledge that BIPOC communities, if you fall in a BIPOC population, if you fall into an LGBTQ+ community, if you fall into a disabled community, whether that's, cognitively, up here in your brain, or whether that's physically, there are gonna be certain vulnerabilities. Okay. And it's not to say that if you fall in one of those populations or one of those communities that you are weak. It is to say that people view you and this one thing about you as something that is weak, and they want to attack that. And so it is experience specific. I can't emphasize that enough. And there are things that bullies generally do, which is going to be name calling. That's a little more direct. There is being passive aggressive. It's trying to isolate you as a person, like those types of things. That's their ultimate goal. If someone is trying to bully another person, and there are just different ways to go about those things. And then, of course, this day and age in technology, I always want to bring up that cyberbullying is a very real thing. I grew up personally I grew up in a time where we didn't my parents didn't have cell phones. They didn't get them till much later, and I didn't grow up with a cell phone all the time. I didn't get a cell phone till I was a sophomore in high school, and even then, I didn't get texting till I was a senior in high school, and me and my family shared that. We had a number of texts that we got to share, and I didn't my friends had to create my social media for me because I didn't have those things. So, I can only imagine the struggles that kids are growing up with these days because the technology, the AI, the real images that like how lifelike they're getting that they've gotten is so crazy. And so there's going to be the way that you deal with an in-person bully is going to be different than the way that you deal with a cyber bully. The way that someone is attacking the way that you dress is going to be different from the way that you address a person who's attacking your skin color. Like these are all things to take into consideration, and dealing with bullies is not a one size fits all solution.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like you really just like gave specifics on it because, it is specific to certain situations or like it's not random. That's usually what I like to say. It's just bullying is not random. I was personally, when I was bullied, I was targeted because of my skin color. There's been countless amounts of, but that's a whole other thing in itself, but there's
Yeah.
been countless amounts of stories that I've just alone have seen on the news where someone was bullied because of their race, because of their sexuality, their gender, their ability, all these different components. And it's so targeting someone for something that is a part of them, something that is beautiful or maybe even unique to them. It's just,
Mhm.
it's to keep it very simple, all types of just inappropriate. It's all types of rude. It's all types of, and on top of that, it leads to within the one being targeted such even more like unhealthy behavior, that anxiety, that depression, that sadness or anything that comes along with that. I
Mhm.
remember in one of our intro calls that you had mentioned that many people who or many people don't know how to channel what they've been through into
Mhm.
something healthy. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to someone, especially a young person, who feels
Mhm.
stuck or angry because of their past?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a therapist. And so whenever I get clients who come in that are that have this emotion, whether it's sadness or anger or shame, whatever the emotion is, I would say to any young person, whatever you're feeling, it is okay. It's okay to feel sad, to feel angry, especially when you reflect on parts of your past that maybe are embarrassing or shameful, things that you don't want to talk about. I want to say that you're not alone in that. We all have things that have happened in our lives that we don't want to talk about. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find a person that doesn't have an experience that they're like, keep away, stay away. I don't want to talk about that. And so you are not alone. And I know that as a kid, I remember feeling as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult when I was in college, so many different points in my life, I remember feeling so alone. And that is, I don't wanna call it a normal part of development, but it's a common experience in our own developments. One of the best things that I think that anybody could do, especially in the context of bullying, right? I always think about resilience, right? That word comes back up. And the best thing that you can do for yourself, I think there are a few things. One, I think you can learn to stand up for yourself. That's one thing that bullies don't expect a lot of times. They're gonna pick on people who they think they can get it away with it. And it's often people who, in moments, can't defend themselves or haven't learned. I won't say can't, haven't learned how to defend themselves in that moment, or who are maybe less likely to do so, or in some cases are unable to do so. And so, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is learn how to stand in your own power. You want to take your power back and say, just because this person thinks this way about me doesn't make it true, right? I can learn and know who I am and feel secure and feel, and that's a skill. All of these things are a skill to learn how to do. But learning how to stand up for yourself and take your power back is so important. Saying something back is kind of the startup to that skill. So many times it's easy to tell kids especially like, oh, just ignore it. Walk away, tell an adult, and I know parents and teachers sometimes are trying their best to help those who are suffering or who are in need, but the reality is those approaches don't work. I wish they did. I really wish they did. They don't. They don't work. They just don't. So then what can we do? I can learn to say something back. I can learn to stand up for myself. Building community is so important. When I worked with kids in my internship, I remember feeling so guilty because I had a hard time communicating to them, like, I promise life gets better. I promise you'll find your people. It may not be right in this moment. Um, but if you take active steps to finding your people, finding your community, those are people who look like you. There are people who don't look like you. There are people who have the same interests as you. They are people who are going to support you, even when your thing is not necessarily their thing. They are people who are going to give you words of encouragement when you need it most. They're people that you can hit up anytime, call or text or video chat, whatever it is that you do, and they're going to answer, right? So you want to build community. And I think one of the other things that you can really learn to do for yourself is find something that you love, that you are passionate about. So I talk about this with my adult clients. I'm like, we've got to take that energy, we've got to put it somewhere. And I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy. And I can't tell you how many comedians tell real stories, and those are my favorite comedians to listen to. They tell these very real stories about being treated horribly, and they've twisted, not that they've twisted the truth, but they've taken it and twisted the story in a way that is not only funny and entertaining for people, but lets people know, like, hey, you can take a horrible experience and turn it into something for your benefit. So whether that's something like comedy, that could be something theatrical like performing. If you're a musician, if you're a singer, if you're a drawer, if you are a storyteller, if you're a person who's into athletics, there's so many things that you can do to channel the hurt, the pain, the stories that you have and turn it into something positive for you, because that's what's important.
You just gave some great advice. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to ask you, especially being that you are a therapist who has also worked with parents, what are
Mhm.
your thoughts on this fact? So, something I've just have understood as I've gone through my I about 7 years now of giving anti-bullying workshops, of working with Humanity Rising, and also speaking to speaking to clinicians, different mental health professionals. So something that I've learned in relation to bullying is oftentimes the bully themselves, they are learning that mentality in their home environment, where their parents are, their guardians are. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
So, funny enough, when I was looking at the research part of bullying, there are these things that we call risk factors versus protective factors. Risk factors are the things that put you at risk for any given event. Protective factors are the things that protect you and make it less likely that adverse situations are going to happen in your life. And unfortunately, not everyone grows up in homes and families that are healthy or that are supportive. There are so many families out there that are dealing with some hard stuff, parents who have their own trauma, who can't seem to get their family above the poverty line, parents who are working so hard to make sure that their kids have a light on at home and food on the table. And sometimes that just means that they're a little more absent. We're again coming back to the fact that we're all human. We all have struggles and we all deal with struggle differently. And that's not always in the healthiest way. And so it's it's hard if you're a person that comes from that kind of home. And if we look at risk factors, some risk factors that kind of naturally put someone at more risk for adverse, not just bullying, but any kind of adverse event happening in their lives, is often single parent homes. And I do want to point out, like, shout out to single parents, like they're trying their best. They're working really hard and they're doing best with they're doing the best that they can with the information that they have right now. And I don't ever want to condemn someone for being a single parent, because sometimes that's the healthiest the thing that they can do for themselves and their kids. It just naturally leaves a child more susceptible, more at risk for something bad happening. And so that's one thing that we found. We found the research has found that um, when you come from families who are already not invested in, but have had several generations of abuse and neglect and substance abuse, so whether that be alcohol or other drugs, that was another piece that, the family doesn't know how to deal with the terrible things that have happened in their generationally throughout their lives. And so that leaves them with limited options, and sometimes the easiest option is gonna be drugs and alcohol. And that leaves a child very naturally more susceptible to abuse and neglect, and it also, um, leads them to a higher likelihood that they are going to get bullied in some form or fashion. That's not true for everybody. It just heightens the likelihood. So those are just some things to be on the lookout for. And I think it's a societal problem. It's not just the parent and child that come from this troubled home. It's not just the school or the therapist that's working with kids and families. It is a societal problem. How do we get people out of these cycles of poverty, out of these cycles of abuse and neglect, out of these cycles of substance abuse? How can we as a society help families as a whole dig themselves out and give them the support that they need so that we build happy healthy relationships and happy healthy human beings? Like, that's ultimately what we want to be able to do. And especially for kids, if we can help kids in a way that have healthier home lives, healthier school relationships, healthier social groups and friends and activities and things to occupy their time, anything that's going to help support them, um, we are going to naturally lessen how much bullying kids experience, how much people feel the need to bully others. And if we can do that, there is a direct link in the research that shows that bullied kids are becoming more suicidal in their thoughts and in their attempts. And that's not what we want. That's not what anybody wants, not for our kids, because these kids are going to grow into adults. And what they learn and the kind of support that they learn to give other people is going to be, as an adult, it's going to be on them to learn now as an adult if they didn't learn it in childhood. How much better would it be if we can give kids all the resources that they need and supports that they need to grow into the happiest, healthiest human being possible, so that they can pass it to the next person and the next generation, and then they can pass it to the next person and the next generation? I mean, what kind of a world would we live in? I think we could drastically shift the kind of world that we live in if we focus on being able to give kids the best resources that we can. So I know that was like a totally long-winded answer to everything that you asked.
No, that was a great response. And there's another fact that you're making me think of, especially when you bring up how oftentimes those who have gone through bullying, they experience suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideations. And
Mhm.
that overall is just so, so devastating. And another thing that I've also have researched, and I mean, listen, you're the therapist, so of course we go with what you say, but also another thing that I've researched and kind of found when speaking to others, and also just actually, again, just going back to the news, especially a couple years ago, um, I'd see a lot of students would go back to school who have gone through bullying, would go back to school with a weapon to get back at their tormentors. Now, so you're based in El Paso, a city often ranked among the safest in the US, yet it experienced deep trauma from the Walmart shooting a few years ago. How has that shaped your views on community healing?
Uh, it Sorry, I got like a flash to a client that I worked with, and she was actually working. She was a Walmart employee, and she was there that day. And the anniversary is in August. I try not to remember the date too well, actually, because I kind of want that day to pass and go. But if the anniversary is this month, and it was just in this past few months that the Walmart shooter actually, I think all of his court cases came to a close because he had state and federal charges. And so community healing, it's it's needed. Like, in order to heal, I think you need community. Um, what makes situations like that so hard, because El Paso's not the only place that has been hit with that kind of violence. We hear about it so often, especially in schools, that People want to get back at other people, and the way that they do it is to use weapons. And you know, I can't speak to any person's personal experience. It's for them to be able to say what their experience was and why they made the decisions that they did. When it comes to community healing, though, to combat some of the violence and hate that really come from those instances, um, you can't push against hate with more hate, because that's just like adding fuel to the fire. And we've mentioned resilience several times. Resilience is not easy. It's not this fairy tale, picture perfect, easy thing, place that you can get to. Resilience, building it is hard, and it sucks sometimes. And sometimes you have to swallow the difficulty of reality. Community is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And when you can come together in support of each other, when you can come together in love of one another, and community healing will really challenge you to consider how much or what lengths you're willing to go to actually heal. Because I would love to say that after working with people who had been there the day of the Walmart shooting, I wish that I could say that I never had another bad thought about the person that perpetrated such violence. And this is just not true. As I was hearing news articles about what was potentially going to happen to this person, I mean, there were harsh things, like they put the death penalty on the table. And up until that point, I was like, I am not a believer in the death penalty. I don't believe in putting people to death. Like, that's an eye for an eye. I don't agree with that mentality on a personal level. And I surely don't believe it on a community level. But that really made me think, like, do I actually believe that? Because this situation is really going to challenge my beliefs. Like, this is a person that really harmed my home. Like, I never had to worry about going to the grocery store, and now I see security guards at the grocery store. Like, I see police, I see armed police, and that was never a thing. And how could I not hate this person that like wrecked my community? But the truth is you have to dive into people. Even if people are going to give you hate, you have to dive into people with love. And that's so hard to do. It's hard to do on an individual level. It's hard to do on a community level. But community is so important. You need people who are going to lift you up when you're down. You need people who are going to be very real with you and who are going to challenge you and tell you when maybe you could benefit from a different perspective. You need those people in your life. You need to be able to go to not just your family and your friends. You need to be able to go to the organizations in your community and say, hey, I think we might have a problem. Hey, I think this group of people really needs our support. And it's when we talk about community healing, when we can do it together, I think that's one of the most powerful things. Like, we're better in numbers. We really are. And so I don't know that that totally answered your question, but I'm a big believer in being able to heal all together. I also recognize that it's hard. It's hard to heal on an individual level, and then to spread that out into numbers. When it happens, it's amazing. It feels amazing. The road to get there, though, can be really challenging, and I wouldn't tell anybody something different.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to open it up to Q&A. Some people have privately sent me some questions, and they actually sound similar to a few of my other questions I wanted to get to with you, actually. So I'm going to word it just to add on a bit. The first question, so in regards to your work, have you noticed patterns of isolation or rejection from earlier life stages influencing mental health outcomes later on?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that one like came quick, like because I automatically thought of a client that I had worked with. And He was an interesting person because he was an incarcerated person. Sorry, that's the majority of where my work has been. And um much like life in general, people learn how to deal with things in different ways. And that's based on experiences, that's based on who you are as a person, that's based on what you've learned throughout your life in terms of coping skills. But I remember this one guy, and there were two group members, and they had been incarcerated a really long time, like 30 years. And one of them, he did every program he could. He did every program. He joined every club, every group. He wanted to do something with his time. He wanted to show people that you don't have to sit in incarceration and do nothing. He was going to be the doer. And then I had this other guy who was so timid and so scared and would isolate himself. And whether that was in my group or back in their living space, that was his way of dealing, which was isolation. And the more I got to know him, the more I realized like that was always how he dealt with it. He had a traumatic brain injury, and it left him scarred in some ways where he was like, I can tell I'm not getting something the way other people are. Um, and that was how he dealt with it. It was so much easier for him to fade into the background and pass by than it was to be involved and engaged. And so, not to say that either of those things were a bad thing, but for anyone that does isolate, because I currently work with clients who definitely want to isolate. Um, my question is always, are you living the kind of life you want to live when you isolate? Because your intention has a lot to do with it. I like to isolate sometimes. I like to go on a walk by myself, and I don't want anyone to disturb me because that's my me time. So it's not a bad thing. It's time that I get to myself, and I love it. I enjoy it. But my intention is to always come back. I want to come back to my boyfriend. I want to come back to my family. I want to come back to my friends. And so I would really ask you, like, what's your intention when you isolate? If you're isolating because you feel alone and you think no one cares, if you're isolating because that's easier than putting myself out there because I'm so scared of rejection or embarrassment, you know, if those are your reasons, let's talk about what kind of life you want to live. What's the actual life that you want to live? And if the life you want to live is you mustering up some courage to put yourself out there more, if the life you want to live is with people, with friends, if you want to live a life that is more involved, that's not just you, which I think most people want to live, then there are steps you can take, because we're human beings, and if COVID showed us anything, it is that we need each other. We need people. We can't do it all alone. No one can do it all alone. And so, yeah, if you create this habit of isolation, it can and will take its toll on you after some time. And as you grow older, it gets harder to really push yourself to get yourself out there. And you'd be amazed at what you can accomplish when you do put yourself out there a little bit more and you try to break the habit of isolation. And so to build some better mental health. So I always want to put that out there. Isolation is not totally bad if your intention is to take some time to yourself and then return back to community, friends, family, class, sports, whatever it is. If your intention is because you don't see another way for you, I would say let's talk about how you can find other ways of coping, because there are some healthier ways to do it.
Celeste, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Mindful Connections podcast. I think this has just been a really great conversation.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've liked the questions, and so I appreciate you asking, and I hope that it was helpful. I hope that someone was able to get something from today. If it didn't land for someone, I get it. But I hope it did. I really hope it did.
Yes, we appreciate you bringing your insight and knowledge on the topic of bullying and also resilience. Everyone, please remember to go Google that word. If what Celeste told you today, if it's still not getting through to you, just look it up. No, I'm just joking around. I'm just joking around. But still, we do need to keep that word resilience in our heads too. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you everyone for joining. Remember, joining the Humanity Rising movement means that you can receive service hours for watching the Mindful Connections podcast and completing our after episode survey, which is again also linked on our interview. Let's be mindful and rise up for ourselves and for each other. All right, everyone, we will see you on our next episode and have a good one.